Dive into the ocean of cognitive psychology with us today as we explore Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. But before we begin, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to this channel where we work hard to bring 5 takeaways of the most interesting books of all times. This remarkable book, penned by the Nobel laureate himself, is a treasure trove of insights into the fascinating world of human cognition. Kahneman, a leading figure in the realm of psychological research, introduces us to the 2 systems that govern our thinking. First, we have System 1, the fast, intuitive, and emotional part of our brain that often makes snap judgments. It's like the hare in the classic fable, quick and nimble. Then we have System 2, the slow, deliberate, and logical part of our brain. It's more like the tortoise, taking its time to ponder and analyze. As we delve deeper, we'll uncover how these 2 systems interact, often leading us into a maze of cognitive biases that shape our decisions in ways we hardly realize. So are you ready to dive into the depths of our cognitive biases and the 2 systems that dictate our decisions? Scene script. First, let's dissect the concept of cognitive ease. Imagine you're on a leisurely stroll through a well-lit, familiar park. You know the bends and turns, the rustling leaves are a familiar sound, and the scent of fresh grass is a welcome aroma. This stroll is effortless, right? That's because your brain is in a state of cognitive ease. It's in its comfort zone, dealing with things it knows and understands. Now let's switch the scene. Imagine you're in an unfamiliar city at night. The streets are dimly lit, the sounds are foreign, and the scents are unrecognizable. You're on high alert, your brain is working overtime to process all this new information. This is a state of cognitive strain. In his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman explains that our brain naturally prefers cognitive ease. It likes the familiar park and not the unfamiliar city. Our brain loves to take the path of least resistance. It savors situations where it can run on autopilot, using ingrained patterns and routines. Think about when you're choosing a restaurant. Do you go for the new, untried place down the street or your favorite spot that you know and love? Most times we'll choose the familiar, even if it means missing out on potentially new experiences. That's cognitive ease at play. Or consider when you're learning something new. If the information is presented in a clear, easy-to-understand format, you're more likely to grasp it quickly. That's because your brain doesn't have to work as hard to process the information. Again, that's cognitive ease working its magic. But here's the catch. While cognitive ease can make life smoother, it can also lead us to make less than optimal decisions. When we rely too much on what's familiar and easy, we can miss out on new experiences, opportunities, and knowledge. So, cognitive ease, it's all about comfort, familiarity, and the path of least resistance. But remember to challenge it occasionally and step out of your comfort zone. After all, growth happens when we dare to explore the unfamiliar. Now let's delve into the intriguing world of heuristics and biases. What are heuristics, you might ask? Simply put, they're mental shortcuts our brains use to speed up decision-making. Imagine you're navigating a complex maze. Heuristics are like the quick rules you might use to find your way out, like always turn right at a junction. But just as these rules might not always get you out of a maze, heuristics can lead us astray. That's where biases come in. Let's talk about a few common ones. First up is the availability heuristic. This is our brain's tendency to think that examples which come to mind easily are more representative than is actually the case. For instance, if you've recently heard a lot about shark attacks in the news, you might overestimate the likelihood of being attacked by a shark, even though these incidents are exceptionally rare. Next, we have confirmation bias. This is our tendency to search for, interpret, and recall information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. So if you believe that all politicians are corrupt, for example, you're more likely to remember news stories about politicians involved in scandals, and less likely to notice the ones where they're doing good work. These are just a couple out of a vast array of heuristics and biases that influence our thinking. Kahneman's work shines a spotlight on these often unconscious mental processes, helping us understand how they shape our decisions and perspectives, often without us realizing it. So remember, our brains love shortcuts. They help us navigate a complex world quickly and efficiently. But like any shortcut, they can sometimes lead us astray. By understanding how heuristics and biases work, we can be more mindful of their influence and make better, more informed decisions. And with that, we're ready to move on to the next takeaway from Kahneman's groundbreaking book, Thinking Fast and Slow. So remember, our brains love shortcuts, but they can lead us astray. Scene script. Ready for another cognitive adventure? Let's talk about the anchoring effect. Imagine you're at a market haggling over the price of an antique lamp. The seller starts at $100, but you manage to bring it down to $50. You walk away feeling victorious, but little do you know you've just been influenced by the anchoring effect. The anchoring effect is a cognitive bias that describes our tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information we encounter, the anchor, when making decisions. In our lamp scenario, the anchor was the initial $100 price. This anchor skewed your judgment, making $50 seem like a bargain, even though the lamp might not have been worth that much to begin with. This effect isn't limited to monetary matters. It also influences our judgments and decisions in various areas of life. For instance, when you hear a piece of news first from a source you trust, that information becomes the anchor. Any subsequent news, even if it's more accurate, has to fight against that anchor in your mind. Now you might think, well, I'm too smart to fall for such a bias. But the truth is, even the brightest minds aren't immune. In fact, studies have shown that even when people are aware of the anchoring effect, they still struggle to disregard the anchor. In one experiment, participants were explicitly told not to let the anchor influence their estimates. Yet the anchor still had a significant effect on their final decisions. So, how can we navigate around this bias? The first step is awareness. By understanding the anchoring effect and acknowledging its influence, we can start to question our initial reference points and challenge our judgments. It's about creating a mental pause, a moment to ask, is this anchor skewing my decision? Remember, our brains are wired to take shortcuts, and while this often helps us navigate the world more efficiently, it can sometimes lead us astray. So anchors away, but beware of where they might pull your judgment. Our final stop explores the prospect theory and overconfidence, two intriguing concepts that Kahneman delves into in Thinking Fast and Slow. First up, the prospect theory. This theory suggests that people make decisions based not on the final outcome, but on the potential for gains or losses. Imagine you're given two choices, a guaranteed win of $100 or a 50% chance to win $200. Despite the potential to win more, many would choose the sure thing, the guaranteed $100. That's the prospect theory in action. We're more driven by the fear of losing than by the potential of gaining. Now let's turn our attention to overconfidence, a bias that can lead us astray in our decision-making processes. Overconfidence, in this context, refers to our tendency to overestimate our abilities or the accuracy of our predictions. Consider a trivia game. You're asked to estimate the likelihood that your answers are correct. You're pretty sure about most of them, so you estimate an 80% success rate. But when the answers are revealed, you've only got 50% right. That discrepancy? That's overconfidence. We often believe we know more than we do, or that we're better at something than we really are. But why does this happen? It's partly due to our brain's tendency to fill in gaps in our knowledge with assumptions, leading us to believe we understand things more fully than we actually do. It's a survival mechanism, really. If our ancestors weren't sure they could outrun a predator, they wouldn't have tried. But that same overconfidence can trip us up in today's complex world. So whether it's weighing prospects or checking our confidence, it's clear our minds are fascinatingly complex. As Kahneman shows, understanding these mechanisms can help us navigate our decisions more effectively and avoid some of the common pitfalls of our own psychology. That brings us to the end of our cognitive journey. We've explored 5 profound takeaways from Daniel Kahneman's masterpiece, Thinking Fast and Slow. Let's quickly summarize. We learned about cognitive ease, which shows us that our minds prefer what is familiar and comfortable. Then we delved into heuristics and biases, reminding us that our brains often take shortcuts, which can lead to biases in our judgment. Next, we discovered the anchoring effect, illustrating how initial information can heavily influence our decisions. We also touched on the prospect theory, a fascinating insight into how we evaluate potential gains and losses. Finally, we discussed overconfidence, a common cognitive bias that can lead to questionable decisions. Each of these takeaways plays a crucial role in our everyday decision-making process. They remind us that our minds are a complex dance between the intuitive and the deliberative. So, next time you make a decision, remember, it's a dance between the fast and the slow. Until next time, keep thinking fast and slow.